Hi there, and welcome to Quick Tips for Teaching. I'm your host, Jenna Camp, and today we're talking about using rubrics to provide feedback for scholars. Whether you're using a rubric for formative or summative assessment, it's important to connect that rubric to the objectives that you've stated for your scholars. My objectives typically come from the Common Core standards that I want my scholars to be working towards mastery of. So for this on screen, there's an example of a rubric that I wrote for a poem home fun assignment. And we are working on 3 specific Common Core standards: a reading literature standard, a writing standard, and the ELD standard. And I've made sure to connect the language of the rubric, what I'm asking scholars to do in that assignment, with the skills that they have been working on in class. I talk about how language that is particularly fresh means that it's unique. I talk about sensory language to convey vivid pictures, really is talking about imagery, the literary device of imagery. And I'm talking about precise vocabulary and making sure that scholars are using precise word choices in their writing. No matter the rubric, it should be your friend. And if the rubric is our friend, then we need to get to know our rubrics and really make sure that our scholars know the rubric so that they can feel the rubric is their friend as well. So let's focus on teaching the skills of the rubric specifically to scholars. Let's make sure to use the same rubric as consistently as possible. If not the exact same rubric, then the same type of rubric. Remember, scholars, especially secondary school scholars, are in 5, 6, 7, or 8 different classes, and that's a lot of different rubrics to get used to. So the more consistent you can be in your class with your rubrics, the better for scholars to understand that rubric and use it to their advantage. Also, make sure that scholars have enough practice with those rubrics. Show them exemplars at the different levels. If you're using a 4-point rubric or an ABC, D, F kind of rubric, or just rubrics that call for mastery, proficiency, or developing skills, etc. Make sure they have exemplars at different levels. Use that same rubric when you're asking them to provide peer feedback to each other, and use that same rubric when you're asking them to self-reflect on their own growth and development. Being able to provide whole class feedback using that same rubric is also more practice and more helpful for scholars to understand what you're asking them to know and be able to do. You can identify patterns of success and struggle. You can use actual scholar exemplars. I always leave the names off, and I always give the scholars a heads up before I use their work in class. I let them know, hey, I'm using a section to show the class this piece of information, but I never use your names. And I make sure I have their permission to do that. And I also want to use that rubric language specifically in my feedback. So for example, if I'm noticing this is from a writing argument, again, kind of rubric, one of the markers, and this is from the SPEC rubric, says that there's some context for a controlling idea or main idea of the topic. So I might agree that there is some context, which means that you might need more contextual development to move from that 3 on the rubric scale to a 4. So this is a formative type assessment. I want scholars to understand you could do more with this section. Similarly, in terms of their organization and idea connection, they do have a strong connection between ideas. That is sufficient. But again, it could be more elaborated. You could go from a 3 to a 4 in this example. And for more formative assessment work, I say, your progression of ideas might be illogical. Try rearranging the order of paragraphs. So in some formative rubric feedback, I try to give them some suggestions as appropriate. For summative rubric feedback, it's really handy to print those rubrics out and use the good old highlighters. You can just highlight, once scholars are really familiar with the rubric, you can highlight the different sections that are there. You can easily see patterns within one scholar's work. You can see immediate outliers that might need particular more work. And that's really useful for scholars to see. Even with math rubrics, not everything is ELA, I know that. So even you can use math rubrics. This again is from the Common Core, from the Smarter Balanced Consortium. And even in this 2-point rubric, there's enough detail in here that you really want scholars to understand what those pieces, those different sentences and qualifiers mean. And then you can just highlight that and they get immediate understanding of what they need to do. I hope this has been helpful for you. For more quick tips, check out jennacamp.com or find me on Facebook or Instagram at JennaCamp Educational. Thanks so much.